and did my undergrad and doctorate in physics from Cambridge. The first thing I did after leaving my World Bank stint was to work on literacy. Literacy is a precondition for success. And the last census, as we know, was only in 2011. So that's a very long time ago. And we don't really know what the status is right now. The best people of the country should be teaching. For the entire country, the number one priority has to be foundational literacy and numeracy. Without that, the rest of education is irrelevant. So we need to radically reform education. The question is how and what.
The current literacy rate of India is around 74%. Kerala is having the highest literacy rate in the country. What Kerala is doing that other states are not implementing? What is the basic difference between education and literacy? To know answers to this question, let's welcome Dr. Sunita Gandhi, who is the founder of Dignity Education Vision International. Hi, ma'am. I welcome you to the Crazy Careers podcast. It is our absolute honor to have you here.
Thank you so much, Neeta. It's just absolutely a pleasure. Anytime I speak about education, fills my heart.
Right. So tell us a bit about yourself before starting the actual conversation and what you exactly do in the area of education.
Okay, to make a very long story short, I started out in Lucknow. My family runs City Montessori School, the biggest school in the world, and in the Guinness Book of Records. So it is the biggest. And I had to have breakfast, lunch, dinner talk about education. And then, lo and behold, I ended up in England and did my undergrad and doctorate in physics from Cambridge. And then after that, I ended up at the World Bank in Washington as an economist. So that, in brief, my journey. And after that, my father said, "Come back to India." So I did because he has this big organization, and he wanted, somebody to be here with him and my mother. So here I have been for a few years now. Um, the first thing I did after leaving my World Bank stint was to work on literacy. And that's what I'm passionate about and I'm doing at the moment.
Right, right. So you have started something called as Accelerating Learning for All. So tell us a bit about that program and also how does it making difference in the society?
Right. So the very first question that I was asking after coming back to India, and that's 26 years away, outside the country, was how come people can't read? That was, of course, I had come on and off and worked on things. Started an NGO years prior, but I felt that, I mean, obviously it's a major, major problem. And why is it we can't solve it? So when I talk to people, it looked like, well, in schools it takes 3 years, 4 years, and that's not just in India. That's worldwide. It takes time to learn to read, um, and it's a crying shame because there must be a way in which they can learn quicker and better. So that's where I started a laboratory, if you like, in my own backyard, in my office, and in the slums of Lucknow. And it was delightful because when you're meeting people who are at the lowest levels in society, and their constraints are so real for them, I think we have to be humble. That what they can accomplish. But if there were a pedagogy that would allow them to learn a lot faster, then I thought it was worth my while to work on it. And that's where I began to do research. One of my own mates just knew the letter B and didn't know anything else. So I started to work with her and tried so many different ideas. And finally, it was like, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't, I just constantly dreamt, how could I make this possible? And then on a flight from Vadodara to Lucknow, I had this, brilliant idea. I said, let me give it a try when I get back to Lucknow. And lo and behold, it worked. It was just completely out of the box. I think a lot of time we are thinking within the box, and therefore we're not able to get those successes that we that are possible. And for this, of course, there's been a lot of intrigue, and to some extent some criticism also, but that makes us feel that okay, we're going someplace. So this pedagogy is called alpha,
Mhm.
which recently I've named in 2022 after many years of research, called it Alpha, accelerating learning for all, and that means for all. Like it doesn't matter the disadvantage or the advantage, but that every child deserves to be able to read, write, and do basic arithmetic, and beyond that, get a quality education. But the foundation obviously has to be something much more exciting than it has been. And what was exciting discovery was that yes, with a very vastly alternative approach, that both adults and children can learn to read in a month, and that's amazing, because they're not learning rote, they're not learning the way we've always learned. They're learning through the power of their mind, through the cognition, the recognition, going from something they know in their environment, which they know, of course, they're functioning fully well in their environment, and then they are able to use that to advantage, to then create their own learning, and with a little starting point. That's all we need, to let them know how to learn by themselves, as basic
Right.
as that.
Right. So, what is basically literacy for you, according to you?
So, literacy is a precondition for success. Literacy is not the end point. Literacy is just a starting point. It's getting a head start. So, there's a lot of research out there that says that if children and adults can read, it's actually enabling them in many more ways down the road. So, for example, they're going through higher classes. If they are disadvantaged with reading and with understanding of what they're reading, they are held back. So it's as simple as that. It's just the first most important building block for life success, and especially in this age of AI, they need to be able to read, write, and engage with what's out there. Otherwise, they'll be left further behind.
Right, absolutely. So Kerala is actually having the highest literacy rates in India, and it is back to back every year. It is the state which is having the highest literacy rate. So, what this state is particularly doing different from other states to have that highest literacy rate,
Okay,
according
so
to you?
many years ago, like we're talking about 1988, 89, is when it had a literacy rate of what is currently the literacy rate of the country as a whole. So something like 75%. And what was interesting was that there was um, a DM and a collector of that district, Ernakulam, who decided to do a vastly different take on adult literacy. And he involved the entire population of Ernakulam in a mass movement, timed mass movement, with one single goal of making people literate. And I think that shows how important it is to make that one boost for literacy, because that's lasted them all these years. And maybe it's led to a lot more children's literacy, because when parents are literate, they want their children to be literate, right? It's natural. And therefore the children literacy is also more. But then there has been complacency. You don't see so much effort going on in Kerala anymore. There is that feeling that we've made it, we're the best, but you see it's not enough, because when you look at the literacy rates, and think of some other top runners in literacy context, both for adult and children literacy, well, it's not translating into children's literacy as much, because the measures for literacy are not showing that they're doing ever so well in the realm of children's literacy. So, you know, it's a relative distinction. What we want is absolute distinction. Why should anybody be deprived of an education that lasts them a lifetime?
Right, right. So just to make it clear for our audience, literacy means to read, write in any kind of language, right? I mean, it should not be only in English or Hindi.
Yes, so mother tongue is most important,
Okay.
because that's where they get the advantage of known to unknown, and they can learn the skill. And once they've learned the skill in one language, it becomes a lot easier to learn in other languages. Number one. Number two, when children learn early on, very early on from the beginning, multiple languages, it really does them well. My daughter studied Icelandic. I mean, not studied, but she was in Iceland with me, and she was a toddler, and she spoke flawless Icelandic. So I think children need to have that. So she spoke three languages: English, Hindi, and and Icelandic. So they learn three, four, five languages in Scandinavian countries very, very naturally. And I think that that's important because it builds more mind connections. Language is so beautiful as well. You know, you get enriched by knowing different languages and how the nuances of thinking in those languages.
Right. How does the government calculate literacy rate?
Okay, so the government for the adults has the census, and the last census, as we know, was only in 2011. So that's a very long time ago, and we don't really know what the status is right now. We did an independent study of adult literacy levels in Lucknow district, and we covered 1.5 million. That's 15 lakh people of 6 to 60 years of age, and we covered all the rural blocks, 8 rural blocks, and 2 of the urban wards out of 4. And so that gave us really conclusive data. And we have pockets in Lucknow that the disadvantages add up. For example, if you're a woman, if you're from a minority, and you're in a rural area, um, some of the pockets only have 10% literacy. I mean, that's just unbelievable. This was a survey we carried out in 2015. This is after I came back to India. I just wanted to know. I mean, I'm really keen to know when nothing has really happened over the years in terms of measurement. The But even if you measure it, what do we do about it then? So that becomes the next question. When it comes to the government involvement, there is the survey by the government where they also check on literacy levels, spot check on literacy levels, and National Sample Survey Organization (NSSO), and they found that literacy levels are 34% overreported. So that is also not showing us in as good a light as we want to be at this point in time. When it comes to children's literacy, numeracy, there is an amazing new policy by the government of India called NEP 2020, New Education Policy 2020, and it came out during the COVID period, 2021, and the goal has been very clearly articulated. That is that all the children up to grade 3 and now up to grade 2 will be able to acquire reading, writing, and foundational numeracy. So they measure it. Very A few years ago, the government started what's called the NAS, National Achievement Survey, and that measures at district level across the country, very massive survey, um, the levels of literacy and numeracy among children of grades 3, and it used to be 5, now it's grade 6, and so forth. So it again shows a situation where we're not very comfortable, or should be very comfortable. The things are not looking that great. I mean, we're talking about independent survey also by some of the other agencies, private agencies, and they have shown, there's a report called Annual Survey of Education report, and that shows that we've regressed to 2012 levels of literacy. This is a report published in 2023 for data that was 2022. So basically, I think COVID did a harm, but even before the COVID, the situation was not so cozy. So we need to work on our literacy. This is so major an issue.
Right. So, what's the basic difference between being educated and being literate?
I mean, obviously, literacy can be defined more broadly than it becomes education. Because what do we teach in education? Obviously, we're teaching for a number of years reading, writing, and arithmetic. So, education obviously is a broader term, and but we want literacy also to be broader. So, when we're talking about literacy, we're talking about all kinds of literacies. Financial literacy, technological, being able to use the mobile, AI literacy. I mean, obviously, in terms of knowledge and expansion of knowledge, that's critical. When it comes to more than that, I would say, obviously, we can agree that a holistic education, not just education, is a necessary part of preparing a child for life. And unfortunately, we may call it education, but what we are doing is not holistic. With teacher at the head, children sitting and watching the teacher all day long, they're not interacting with each other much. They may do 10% of the time, maybe, a very, very, let's say, a very holistically oriented classroom or a school, you might see a little more of interaction among children, but mostly they're passive recipients of knowledge. And in that, they're not learning to interact with each other, which is so fundamentally important if you're going to build collaboration. And so it should not be just 10%, 20% of the time. What we're doing with Alpha, which is the pedagogy that I'm mentioning to you, which is breakaway from old molds, in this, we're not trying to add on things to literacy. We're teaching literacy and education, if you like, um, with a new process that is part and parcel of the learning. So, for example, children are actually 100% of the time learning through pair learning. So they're children who are put into pairs every single day, and so they're working with each other. Now, there's another thing that we do, which is really, really important, and that is to build equity and inclusivity. Is that we pair children randomly every day. So they come, they pick out their names from the jar, who will be their partner. They don't sit with the same partner. So within a month or so, they're able to work with every single child in the class. And I think that's so powerful, so beautiful, because it's not trying to say, oh, you're not intelligent, you're not good enough, you need to sit with so and so who can help you. And that differentiation is coming in the way of making us good human beings, because we should not differentiate. We should see everybody as having their own strengths. And how do you build that in except, through radically reforming the way we are learning and the processes by which we're learning. So paired learning we found to be not just building holistically the children, because there's a lot more, the four goals that NEP, New Education Policy, says we should have are collaboration. So that's really at the heart of a collaborative learning environment, that they're working in pairs. B, communication, which is so critical, that they should be able to articulate. They should be able to ask a question, not just answer questions somebody puts up. Third is creativity in a classroom like we are envisaging, we are doing across the country. We are finding that children are building tremendous creativity because they have to creatively engage with the environment, bring up things that maybe from like leaves and petals, and from home, to reuse, recycle what they have, and just be really creative in asking questions. And the fourth thing is critical thinking, which comes from interacting with the other, and you're at that very real moment in time, you're having to ask a good question or come up with something. And we're seeing, little kids literally are becoming so alert and so confident in the use of their languages, in their concept formation, in their understanding, in their clarity of their thoughts, in their ability to engage with each other at any level. And I think this is so beautiful. We're building the basis of a humane world for all.
Right. So we are hearing a lot of student suicide news here and now. So do you think that are we really making our children future ready?
No, I don't think so, because we are not clear as to what we want for the future for our children. If we are clear, we're not just looking at academic excellence, and that also just for a handful of children in a class. Then also, on a written paper, that's a 2 hour, 3 hour paper, and that defines who you are. I mean, from the micro level of how we perceive success to the macro environments in which we put our children, which is really the old machinery that has to go away. It's the classic, we don't need such an education. Absolutely, we don't need that kind of education. So we need to radically reform education. The question is how and what. So here we have, I think, probably there are many good people out there in the world at large who are all accepting that this is not adequate, and they are doing their bit to try and come up with an alternative model of education. You see examples of it everywhere, literally in every country. People are daring enough to go challenge the status quo and say this is not good. This is not creating the kind of vision we have for humanity or for each other. Like a collaborative, humane world where we respect each other, we care for each other, we worry about poverty, we don't accept those differences, we don't think that I'm great because I've just been born into a very good, well-to-do family. We are concerned, and every child in our schools has to develop themselves as a global and national citizen, the one who loves their country and loves the world. and cares about it enough to do something about it, not just live and live an old definition of success, which is to go make lots of money, what a package you've got. I mean, there's such a lot of myopia that we need to address. But there is a lot of good work going on across the world, and I think Alpha is one of those examples of where we are creating the rubric, the foundation of something much greater to come. It's just totally different.
Right. So you have traveled more than 50 plus countries to study about their education system. So which country's education system do you find the most holistic one and why?
Okay, so there are bright spots everywhere. I mean, that was what was exciting. That when I went to Israel, for example, right now we're of course dealing with very unfortunate set of circumstances there. But we'd gone to visit with Alan Slivka, one of my friends from New York. Um, the coexistence work going on in among the Arab and the Christian and the Jew communities, and that was fascinating. I learned so much being there. I've seen great teachers, great policymakers making huge indents into the education scene. But I'd say, of course, there are bits of it that you can pick up. In Finland, I had the opportunity to visit a lot of schools. I was a state guest in 2013, invited by the Finnish National Board of Education at the time, and the teachers are so well educated there, and I think what we learn from them is that the best people of the country should be teaching. And so they've figured out a system. They put education as number one priority. So it's a policy level huge victory, where they have the creme de la creme of their educational products vying really to be a teacher, because it's well respected, but it's also well paid. And imagine the children in their classes when the teacher is a winner. So they respect their teachers, they want to learn from them, and these teachers are driven. They want to do great things because they've always been driven. That's how they got there. So I think there's so much to learn from most everywhere. And we learn also one thing great about Finland was the humility of the teachers. Here sometimes we get into this, oh, we are the greatest country, we have the greatest education, we are the best, look how many scientists we have made, look how many great IITians there are and all that. But you look at the size of the country, look at the population, what percentage of people succeed in that way. And we have to be humble, and I think when we're humble, we learn more. When we're humble, we create greater excellence for our children, because we keep learning, we keep opening up the pages of the books, we go to libraries, we go to bookstores and look for what's new, we go on the internet and look what's new. And if you're not doing that, we're too complacent. And I think that's what we're dealing with. We need to get out of that comfort zone and be circumspect about what we know. And Finland, the teachers have so much humility. Same I found in Singapore. The teachers have a lot of humility. They also, what is really interesting about Singapore is that everybody is involved in research. The government has put, again, the highest priority of their country's development on education. Every street you will see education is our future. It keeps reminding people that we need to have our education at the highest level. And what I found fascinating also was the fact that government is putting funds into research. And so every teacher, an ordinary teacher, becomes extraordinary, because they're constantly being concerned about where's the evidence. So if I want to do something different, where's my evidence? And then they go share it at conferences such as the one I attended there in 2007. So I've been really very fortunate to be in a position, a, to grow up in a family that is educators family, and having that discussion every single day about what makes a good education, a good educational leader, a good teacher, a good parent even, and to what extent are we doing that. And then in addition to that, to have the opportunity to work at the policy level with the World Bank in Washington for 10 years, glorious years. I went all over the world. I think I did 38 countries through the World Bank, and then I did a whole bunch on my own. So about 50 countries. The last one to visit was Maldives. Just recently, so I might get a 51st country, God knows when. But certainly, it was really awesome to see this beautiful country made of small islands, striving so hard to provide an outstanding education, and the whole country is is proficient in English. How did they do that? So lots to learn from everywhere.
Right. So, what are some focus points in national education policy that you would like our audience to know?
So, Education Policy 2020, which came out in 2021, it is very categorical and very clear in its objective. It's a very big document, it's about 450 pages long, but it clearly enunciates in the very first few pages that for the entire country, the number one priority has to be foundational literacy and numeracy, FLN. And it says that without that, the rest of education is irrelevant, which is really powerful. I mean, we never heard that before that, because, of course, there were a lot of efforts on literacy and numeracy across the country. And even what we call education is about that. But when I would go in 2014 and around the time I'd come and go to India, I'd talk to the government policymakers, and they'd say, no, we don't have a literacy problem. Uh, we moved over. We are not doing literacy anymore. We are now educating our children. And look at the crises that exists in our schools even today. We're talking about 2014, and now it's 2024, 10 years later, 11 years later. Things are not that much better. So we're going to spend another decade, and look back at the decades before us. So literacy and numeracy is number one priority, and I think that is something that the NEP has so beautifully enunciated in its document. It's a very progressive policy, and I think a lot of countries can learn from that policy, because it talks about a broader, bolder education, in its own words, but the idea that children should have the 21st century skills, such as ones I mentioned earlier: collaboration, communication, critical thinking, and creativity. It talks about even reform at the level of the structure of education, that okay, early childhood education doesn't have to be all this um, great focus on preparing a kindergarten child for 10th grade, literally. So let's have more playful learning, and even books are not necessary at this point. I'd so agree with that, because you can have a teacher guide that guides them and prepares them in a better way. There's a lot of emphasis on teacher training. There's also higher educational focus, which is giving more choices to the youth and the adults, young adults. It's a very progressive policy. I'd say that of course, it has not gone so far as to tell you how to do it, but it has laid out what to do, and that's the vision that has been missing. What are we going for? What are we really trying to create through education? I think it's very, very, very clear.
Right. So, if given a chance, what are the changes that you would like to make in our current education system?
Yeah, so I think we should be far more open to new ways of doing things. That is not happening. We are too complacent, we are too comfortable. We just think, oh, this year I'm going to do such and such, and somehow magically there will be a better education. There's a lot of arrogance, I would say, and that kills innovation. Um, so, for example, a policymaker will say, and I'm working with the government schools, by the way, not just private schools. My program Alpha, I started in 2022 in 20 schools of Shamli district of Uttar Pradesh. And Shamli and Sambalpur, Odisha, both were given to us by Anita Karwal, former Secretary of Education, Ministry of Education in New Delhi. And I showed her, I said, well, my results are coming out to be really highly positive. These kids can read in 30 days. And she was one of the people who said, let's go for it. She believed instantly. And I think you should believe educators. You shouldn't be circumspect. There are a lot of people in an administration who have no background in education, and yet they are the ones who are deciding what should be done. And they're not open minded. They'll go with precedents, they'll go with what has happened already, but that's not new. That's what they've done for years. Some NGO that has worked in Uttar Pradesh for 24 years or 20 years or 15 years or 10 years, where's the macro level data showing that things have improved? And if they haven't, why shouldn't they look at something new? And they're not so open because they don't understand education, and they'd rather not take the risk. So to them, I'd like to say that, look, I mean, why don't you give it a try? Why don't you take one small district which is really struggling? We have districts in our country that have 4%, 5%, result from the equivalent of what in UP is called NAT, Nippon Assessment Test. Nippon being the scheme of government of India, which comes from the NEP for addressing this foundational literacy and numeracy crisis. So, this Nippon assessment shows that one of the districts of Uttar Pradesh has 4% NAT result. That means 4% of the schools are meeting the criterion for being foundationally literate and numerate. That's a crying shame. I mean, literally. So how can you be so arrogant as to say, look, next year I'll solve the problem, or this year I'll solve the problem, because look, I know what I'm doing, I know what the data is showing to me, I feel very confident we're going to turn this around this year or next year, and then we don't need any of you guys, right? And it's really not possible, because decades before these people have been similar efforts. We keep being very, very overconfident when we need to be underconfident given the crises, and we need to try everything. And I think that's why I'm calling together a leadership circle end of November, um, and calling these people to give it a try. Like, take up the worst districts in your states, your union territories, and let's do a research implementation. We've got a control group, we've got a treatment group. You yourself gauge, has it done better or worse? And when we did that in Uttar Pradesh, in 4 districts, the results were twice or thrice the other schools. And that macro level, even 10% different looks really good. But we're talking about, at the macro level, 200% to 300% improvement between alpha schools and non alpha schools, given the same teachers, but with a different gadget in their hands, a different pedagogy in their hands, being empowered differently, and trusting the children that they can learn by themselves. It has made a major difference, and that they can learn in pairs.
Right.
So I think we have loads of testimonies, and not just testimonies, we've got now data. And I think data is where we need to go. We need to have evidence. A lot of people saying, oh, I've been doing this for years. Listen to me. I'm the best. Well, where's the data? And in our case, the very first project we did in Shamli, Uttar Pradesh, I immediately connected with the Harvard Graduate School of Education, AGSE, and I requested Professor Fernando Reimers if he can allocate some of his master's level students to do a scrutiny on this project, because I was very confident that we are going to achieve results very quickly. So we did a RCT, randomized control trial, of schools which were in the control group and in the treatment group, some 2,000 children each in 10 schools. And the results after 40 days were measured again. So there was a baseline and an end line. And the results showed some of the best results in the world. When you look at the Copenhagen consensus, you look at the World Bank reports, all these are reports that have measured what is the benefit to cost ratio, but also what's working in terms of literacy and numeracy. And our results are by far the best. Now, we are new, so we're not in those books yet. But Harvard Graduate School of Education has shown that the results are really dramatic. And not just that, the NAT results for Uttar Pradesh, the government's own tests, have shown that the alpha schools are doing 2 to 3 times the results of their own, other pedagogies, whether it be, so many other great efforts going on. Efforts are good, but we need results. We need to see. We don't have time to mess around with. We just have to be very, very much more open-minded. And I think that's where the struggle is coming, is to have more faith. And I'd say one more thing, which is to question expertise, because there are a lot of experts out there, and you see any innovation in the past, whether it be in the scientific realm, on the in any field, literally has been opposed the most by experts, and they're the first ones to say this won't work. And I think that's what's happening this year. 30 days, 45 days, how can you get a person literate in 30 to 45 days? How can they learn to read their textbooks in 30 days, or a newspaper in 30 days? So, they're the ones who are opposing it, because they want to take 3 years or 4 years. And we're saying, look, there's not enough time. Let's give them a boost. So we talked about the Ernakulam boost, right? So that boost is important. Give them a boost, get them to a new level, a new normal, and then let them engage with any kind of learning, and they'll do so much better. And one more final thought I want to say is that, it's really important for governments to integrate such pedagogies in their curriculum. Integrate, because it's not enough to have NGOs come and do successes in 4 districts or 20 districts. Right now we have a complete state that has taken up alpha, right? So now we are going to show results at the state level. But we only started in 2022. We have from 20 schools to 17,000 schools, but still it's a drop in the ocean. What we want is integration in the curriculum. We're offering it as a gift. There is no cost involved to the exchequer. There's no cost to anybody, because you'll integrate it within your curriculum. We're just saying, look, do the pilots, understand it's working, and if it's working, scale it up immediately to millions of children, because we don't have time to waste.
Right. So, how do you imagine the future of literacy in India today? And what is your vision about it?
Okay, so the path to getting where we think we need to be, which is that all of the country adopting this pedagogy, which is where my heart is, that if it is better, then why not? And not just better, it's many times better on every front. So I don't want to go into details, but really the vision is to bring these governments together, to ask them to do the pilots, research implementations with good, solid research design, third party evidence. And if it works for them, we are able to show results in 30 days. So, look, I mean, why don't we just do 30 to 40 days pilot? The problem that comes is that they want to run everything together. Well, that doesn't work, because anything that you do in parallel can take forever. So we're saying 30 days concentrated effort on FLN, give it a boost, and then see if it's working, integrate into your curriculum, and let's get all the states, at least a critical mass of states initially, do it before 26, 27, which is the deadline for the Nipun Bharat mission, to show the country and the world that there is a new path forward. So that's my vision.
All right, it was really an insightful conversation with you, and thank you so much for your time and for joining us.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much indeed. Really, I appreciate the crazy careers. I appreciate you, Neeta ji. It's just awesome to be here on it and to be able to share my, unfolding story of Alpha journey. And Alpha is the way forward. And I really appreciate your taking the time to put this on your podcast.
Right, you're really doing a great job. Thank you so much for that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.